Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Maurice Brown Comedy Show, Comedy in the Kingdom Tour on Bog Radio in association with 24 Flicks and courtesy of KCHF TV. We have a very special guest on the Maurice Brown Comedy Show this morning as we are focusing on the comedy tour that I'm creating with some awesome clean comedians, one of which is right here with us right now. This comedian right here, you may have seen on Dry Bar Comedy, Amazon Prime Video, or the Maurice Brown Comedy Show, breaking down the four walls. He was selected Best Stand-Up Comedian Clean at the 2021 Atlanta Comedy Awards and was the CMN Network Male Comedian of the Year on Roku TV in 2020. He's also performed with Michael Jr., Jeff Allen, John Christ, and Erica Rhodes. And he's also an active member of the Christian Comedy Association. Ladies and gentlemen, with no further ado, please welcome comedian Donnie, the entertainer, Stopa. What's up, Donnie? How are you?
Maurice, hey, bud. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, as always.
Man, it's been a while, Donnie, since we've had a chance to speak with you. Usually you're on my edition and/or / iteration of Breaking Down the Four Walls, but you're too busy. I mean, dude, you're doing this, you're doing that. I mean, you're always performing. You've written a book. You've done your Dry Bar Comedy special. You're also working on a comedy documentary, which I think is going to be absolutely awesome. So you got a lot of things going on with you. You're hard to catch up with, Donnie. That's just the bottom line, dude. I totally get it. But I want to talk a little bit about your experience doing your Dry Bar Comedy special. And it was filmed during the pandemic. So a lot of comedians, had to go through the process of audience members wearing masks. It was that time of our the state of the world was in a real terrible situation regarding COVID-19, but you were able to get that done. Tell us about that experience in Provo, Utah.
Oh man, well, I had a lot of experiences there. So what I will say is that the Dry Bar people, everybody was very sweet, everybody was really nice, and they have a very professional setup. Their production's killer. It's amazing. It's it's a machine. They're really churning out the content, doing a great job. So I went out to Provo. They fly you in. You're there for a couple days, and then you leave. And so when I got there, it was the second week after the pandemic shutdown. So they had been shut down, and then it was their second week back. So, and this is this is 2020. So, people were still not sure, how dangerous COVID was or how easy it was to catch. So, there were obviously, a lot of unknowns for a while. So, the people were a bit timid and, they were limited. So usually they probably in that room, at least before I recorded, they would have up to about 400 people in that room. So when I came, they were limited to 50 people in the building. So, so it was very sparse and the tables were very spread out to where, they were not 6 feet, but 20 feet apart. It felt, So it's and the way I see comedy is it's the audience is an organism that you're trying to bring together on the same, train of thought and bring them along a journey together. And it felt like I was just kind of dealing with, however many, 8 separate, 10 separate audiences because of all the tables. So again, it was not ideal for a comedy special to film in front of very few people who are very afraid to laugh because they don't know if there are particles coming out or, what's going to happen. But, I try to just enjoy the ride as I do. Anytime I get on stage, I'm like, hey, I'm going to have fun and I'm going to invite everybody else to have fun along with me. And hopefully they will. So that was my experience, really.
Well, you did a great job as you always do, Donnie, on
Thanks, sir.
stage and dealing with those circumstances. You did it plum. It was awesome, and we're gonna give our audience an opportunity to get an idea of your comedy. We're gonna play a snippet of your dry bar in Provo. Here's Donnie Stopa, ladies and gentlemen, talking about Christians owning coffee shops.
So you know what? I like coffee. I actually went to a Christian coffee shop, and it was pretty good. But the prices were ungodly. They need to repent, man. I'm just saying. I went there. I like tea. They have all different types of tea, like green tea, red tea, black tea, and you get a blend of all three. It's the Trinity. Thank you. And actually, also, they have different types of coffee. They have different types of coffee, like Namin flavor. It was like cinnamon, but no sin. Yeah. And then they have the Colorado blend. They call it pot roast. I asked the barista, I said, hey, how's the pot roast? They said, why don't you just ask the high priest? Come on. Nice. So I recently got hired to do a Christian event. And they said, Donnie, we know you play music. Would you mind playing us some Christian songs? I said, okay. But I don't know a lot of Christian songs. So let's just try this. Here we go. I want to name all of the animals. It's from the book of Genesis, guys. He made my woman from my insides. It's a rip joke, guys. I want my baby back, 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 baby back. That one's actually about my ex-wife, though, so. This one's a little more modern. Girl, look at that Bible. I work out. That's why the guitar looks small. Now, this one I'm going to do for a Baptist event. So if you like it, sing along. Just don't dance. Christians in the morning, Christians on the street. Christians don't smoke cigarettes, but they sure do like to eat. Got to find some Christians, cause I wrote this Christian song. I went to Benny Hinn's church, now my money's all gone. It's okay, he told me I get it back tenfold. Christians, what I got? Christians, what I got? So remember that, Christians, what I got? So remember that, Christians, they don't smoke pot unless it's medicinal. And we got a high priest, remember? Christians, what I got, thank you.
Yeah, man, I love it. The thing about Christians, man, Christians are funny. There's so many jokes you can make
all day,
about
yes.
it.
Yeah.
I always used to tell my son when he was younger, it's like, we try to emulate the world in so many different ways. And you got the band and you got this glass over the drummer, I'm like, I thought that was to protect the drummer from beer being thrown at him. I guess they figured that, we got to protect ourselves from coffee being thrown at us. We're just rocking up here. Anyway, Donnie, it's a lot of jokes you can make. That was a great snippet of your routine. How can fans see your special in its entirety?
Well, I have well, I guess I don't know if it's an entirety, but I have a version of it on my YouTube channel, which is Donnie the Entertainer. You can also look up Donnie Stopa, and it'll send you to that page. I have a couple other comedy specials on there. I have one. I think my favorite one is not even a comedy special. It's called "This Is Not a Comedy Special," because it was just me taping, a set that I had, and it's like 55 minutes, and it's a lot of fun. It kind of captures my different pieces of my act, because I have the guitar, and then I have jokes, and then I have, the it's like a variety show, So that's one of my favorite ones, I think. And then, the Stepdad Bod comedy special as well. So yeah, you just go to my YouTube, or DonnieTheEntertainer.com has links to all my social media stuff.
I love it. We were talking about the Comedy in the Kingdom tour that I'm creating with yourself and Leland Klassen and Mark Christopher Lawrence, Willie Brown, Valina Metcalf,
I
Gilbert
just talked to a couple of
Esquivel.
those guys. Yeah.
Yeah, Gilbert Esquivel out in San Diego with Scott Wood, Danny Successful Simmons, and Michelle Van Duzen, Felicia Fifi Frazier down in Pompano Beach, Florida. And that's just to name a few. I mean, got a ton of really, really funny, clean comedians. And we want the world to know that, comedy can be done the clean way and kill. And,
Oh
and
yeah, absolutely.
quite frankly and honestly, if you look at the most lucrative comedian in the world right now, is Jerry Seinfeld. Jerry Seinfeld is worth almost $1 billion. The closest comedian to Jerry is Kevin Hart, and he's off by like $5-6 million. Of course, I'll take Kevin's money, but
I'll take the gap. I'll take the difference.
I'll take the gap. But it just tells you the potential for clean. And by gosh, we're doing it in Christ, Donnie. So hey, we've got we've got all of the pieces in place to go out there and show the world how it's done.
Oh, absolutely, man. I mean, I feel like God's, always, like, I mean, I guess the way you measure success is different depending on what your values are. But I know that God has, prepared a lot of people for, times like this, to where we can bring levity, to these situations that are going on in the world or in our lives, or things that we can relate on. And people are tired of, they're tired of, I guess, going the easy, dirty route, because a lot of people would say that's an easier way to do it. I think funny's funny. I mean, if you're good and you're funny, you can be dirty or clean. It's just, if you're dirty, you're kind of limiting yourself to only specific demographics. And being dirty in and of itself, if that is the means for you to get a laugh, then that means you're probably not funny. So again, I prefer to do clean comedy just because that's genuine to me. And obviously as a Christian, like, I want to represent Christ, and God blesses it, man. He will, as if you put the work in, I can't hear you, buddy. Can you hear me? I can't hear you.
So just a bit of a technical glitch there. We're back rolling here. But Donnie, and by the way, ladies and gentlemen, we're talking with comedian Donnie the Entertainer Stopa on Bog Radio, the Maurice Brown Comedy Show, in association with 24 Flicks, also Curtis Casey HFTV. Donnie, want to talk to you a little bit about how you got started in stand-up, and was there ever a transition for you from secular to clean?
Okay, so I started comedy in 2008. From an early age, I knew I wanted to be a comedian. When I was 7, that was the first time I had seen stand up on TV. That's like when Comedy Central came out, and I was obsessed with it. I think it was Bill Hicks was the first act I ever saw, and then, or either him or Dennis Leary, because Dennis just used Bill's jokes. But anyhow, like, it's weird. I learned about that. But so I mean, I was obsessed with comedy my whole life, and then you know, when I got to when I finished college, I was determined to pursue, you know, doing stand-up comedy. So 2008, I started at a club called Side Splitters Comedy Club. It's here in Tampa. It's actually a pretty famous club now. And so I did my first open mic. I had a blast. It was, you know, very clearly something I was, you know, I believe, or again, clear to me, you know, it's subjective, but it was clear to me that this is like home. This is where I am most myself
Yes.
and most able to be used, I think, for a greater purpose. Now, at the time, I was a Christian. So when I started comedy, I was a Christian, but I was kind of a baby Christian, you know. So as far as secular, um, yeah, I don't know if I would say secular is the word. I think for me to find my voice, I think that was what it was. I had to figure out, because authenticity and truth is what's going to resonate. Because if I'm inauthentic on stage, you can only get so far, you know, being
Yeah.
fake it till you make it kind of person. Um, something will have to give at some point. So, you know, I was kind of at this, I had a little bit of an internal, you know, tension about, okay, I'm a Christ follower, but I also, I love comedy, and I'm in the comedy clubs, which is not a, you know, a very God honoring type of place a lot of times. So, and the you know, the company, you know, with the other comics, you know, there's a lot of darkness and things that were not ideal for, you know, having a relationship with God.
Yes.
So I definitely felt that tension early on. The first year, I had, you know, I'd kind of, I like to, you know, explore creatively, like push the envelope on different things. But I realized whenever it conflicted with my conscience and what, you know, what God says about me and who I
Yeah.
am, you know, because again, it has to be genuine. I just realized that when I tried to do the cheaper, I wasn't necessarily blue, but I, you know, I kind of like to toe the line a little bit of, you know, being suggestive or, you know, innuendo. And I got to the point where I said, you know, that's just not me, and it's not going to even be believable if I don't believe it, if I don't
Yeah.
believe this is who I am. So I just said, okay, I'm going to be genuine. I'm going to be, and comics are pretty good about, you know, being introspective and looking inside. Okay, like what do I really believe about this thing that I'm talking about?
Yeah.
And so I think that's an advantage that, you know, Christian comics have, is that we can, well, okay, I guess I could explore all different angles of that. But I will say, you know, if you are truly out to live for God, like you're going to have to look inside. You're going to have to see, what are my motives. You have to weigh it against God's word. And so because I was always, you know, weighing those things out, it took me about a year before I started saying, okay, well, absolutely not going to talk about any of these things. But it really took me, you know, at least, I don't know, it took me about 7 years, at least maybe 7 to 10 years before I got to where I felt I had my voice. Like I said, okay, this is my comedic voice. This is my persona. This is who I want people to know
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
am. And so, yeah. And then, you know, from once that clicked with me, which it took me a decade, but once it did, it allowed for so much freedom. You know, it's for freedom that Christ set us free. So I'm like, okay, like I don't have to be burdened by what other people think of my comedy, or what other people think I'm trying to say or not trying to say, or I'm saying bad, or I'm saying,
Yeah.
you know, like obviously there's accountability, but that accountability has to fall in line with what God says, you know. So I said, okay, I'm only going to
Absolutely.
think about what God says about me and not what other people are saying. And that was the moment where I was like, okay, I got it. Like I have clear vision on what I'm doing.
And it's interesting when you talked about, okay, you started and then you got that home feel. This is home. And you knew
Yeah.
you were doing, you know, what God created you to do. I had an interesting start myself. I was in radio back in the 90s, and my operations manager said, I think you should try stand up. I had never thought about doing it. I was just
Yeah.
funny on the radio. And so there's a comedy club in North Carolina, Raleigh, North Carolina, called Charlie Goodnights, probably one of the
Yeah.
top comedy clubs on the East Coast. And they had an open mic night where you had to, audition. You couldn't just say, I want to be, So it's like 20, 25 people auditioning to open up for a regionally known comedian. And they only picked 4, and I was one of the 4 that was picked. And I went up there, and dude, I was so nervous. It was like at North Carolina State University. The stage was in the middle of the club, and I mean, they were screaming, drunk college kids all over the place. So I wasn't able to really deliver because I was just so nervous, man. I wasn't nearly as calm as when I auditioned. But that being said, once I got my feet under me and said, okay, this is what it is. This is how you do this. I was off and running. But when you've been called to do something, and then when you realize that God's the one that created you this way, you do it for Him.
100%.
And that's how you get out of that gutter type of thinking and the negativity, because God didn't create you to do that, and so you start learning how to write. Brian Regan, another clean comedian, who simply said, actually, I do use profanity in my normal life. I don't think the stage, however, I don't even think there's a need to use profanity in writing a joke. That's what he said.
Absolutely not. Yeah.
And so I thought that was quite amazing. And great story, Donnie, how you got started in stand up. And as I ask you that, what is your view of stand up comedy today in 2023, Donnie? And how is stand up perceived in your mind by general audiences?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think stand up is something that is always going to be provocative. It's always going to and not provocative like dirty, but provocative like it's going to challenge people and their understanding of, or their worldview, So I think that comedy nowadays is, I think, more valuable than it ever has been. I mean, in my life, or in my lifetime, or in recent history, I think it's it's as important as ever. And I think that people are starting to become aware of the fact that it's so important to think for yourself and question what you've been told. Question the why. Like, okay, again, that introspection of, which is something that comics is crucial for any type of purpose in life. You need to know, why am I doing this? Why is this funny? Why is this relatable? Why do I connect with this particular comic?
Yes.
And so I think, again, it's in a time where, people are divided and we're being told that this person or this thing is my problem or my enemy, then a comic has the ability to break through all that through shared experiences, laughter, and levity, to where people can say, oh, okay, maybe I should think for myself rather than, what other people are trying to think, group think, you could say, or, what I'm being told by the media or my family or whatever it is. Think for myself so I can have a genuine perspective and a genuine connection with God and people. So for relationally, humor is huge. I mean, like if you go on a dating app, which unfortunately I've done that. I went on, and you go on Christian Mingle, okay, and you see, some of these girls, I don't think they're Christian, but I will say that it's very common to see sense of humor is like the number one thing that women want, in a man, or in a relationship. So again, to be relational, there's already that like an opportunity to connect with others through laughter. So I think in a time where we feel isolated, there's such a major desire for everyone to connect, and
Yes.
comedy is a vessel for that. So and also a vessel for truth, because truth is funny. It's funny because it's true. If you ever hear that, that's actually because it's genuine and authentic, and that's what will connect.
Well, and I think that what we've encountered, particularly after COVID-19, because I know I would go to a mic just to get ready for show. It'd be like 12, 15 people there. And now you go out, there's like 50 comedians, 60 even sometimes. And I'm like, where did all these comedians come from? And a lot of it is bad. I hate to, be critical like this, but a lot of it is bad. It's gutter talk, it's sewage talk, it's profanity, and it's what they think it's funny. They're not speaking their truth. They're speaking what they think is a truth. But
Yeah.
you're the one that's on stage right now. It's your mic. So tell me what you think. And they're not doing that. And a lot of comics also have fallen into the trap of trying to be like some of the greats, and Eddie Murphy and Richard Pryor and George Carlin and other greats that have been profane. The only thing is they were telling their truth.
Right.
You're trying to tell
authentic.
somebody
Yeah.
else's truth.
Right.
Okay. And that's what makes it really bad. You cannot be disingenuous as a comedian.
No.
Getting back to what you said about truth, you have to tell the truth. You did a doc, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to Bog Radio in association with 24 Flicks. This is the Maurice Brown Comedy Show with Donnie the Entertainer Stopa, and also courtesy of KCHF TV. Donnie, you had an opportunity to do a documentary earlier in the year, and I've seen the trailer. I can't wait to see the full documentary, but it talks about comedy versus cancel culture, which and I think as clean comedians, we run the danger of being canceled just like any other comic, because we have a certain standard, a certain belief, and we're not up there, cracking on people for the sake of busting on them. We're telling jokes. We're just having fun. And you can get canceled, quite frankly, honestly, if you don't get that joke delivered in the right way. But I kind of want to play the trailer, and then I want to talk about the motivation for the documentary. Once again, I think is going to be absolutely awesome. Donnie Stopa's documentary trailer of comedy versus cancel culture.
Cancel culture. We're talking about censorship in comedy. Do you think that cancel culture exists in comedy?
Basically, in a nutshell.
Definitely feel like, as bizarre as it sounds, like there's a war on jokes right now.
Cancel culture, it's such a misdirected umbrella term. You can't police what is subjective.
Oh, wow! Like, you kind of have to live your life bulletproof now. You just have to.
Greatest night in the history of television.
You can't say an inappropriate joke that doesn't have the right context.
There's always going to be some sliver of cancel culture, of woke, of political correctness.
You're not funny, and this is how you have to do the joke, because I know how funny jokes work. That's not the joke.
I don't believe people get canceled. I believe that they have a shift in their audience.
Put your hands together for Mr. Joe Rogan!
When people say somebody is canceled, I think it just means, oh, we found they did or said something that most people don't like.
I date a lot of bimbos. That's the problem.
So what?
So let's think about that joke in today's culture.
I absolutely love it, and I can't wait until that's complete. I think the greatest statement in that trailer was Chris Rock after getting slapped by Will Smith saying, "This is the greatest night in the history of television." Well, I'll say this. It was the most confusing night for sure in the history of television. But Chris Rock stood there, took a humiliating slap in the face because of a lighthearted joke that one of the most well-known celebrities in acting could not digest, and acted like a juvenile, went onto the stage and slapped Chris Rock. And I think that cancel culture now, I don't know if you would agree with this statement, and I want you to talk more about the documentary, but I think that moment opened up the door for cancel culture to be front and center.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you know, I think that terms and definitions change all the time. So what's cancel culture today may be something different tomorrow, but there is absolutely a war, like JB Ball there said, you know, there's a war on jokes. And again, I think it's about the why. You know, why is there a war on jokes? Why is that such a big deal? And so really that was the question we asked was, hey, why is this a problem, or why is this not a problem, or why, you know, what do you think? We just literally asked people on both sides of this issue, or all angles we could find, and said, you know, because we're just trying to find the truth in the midst of, you know, what people's opinions are. And you can obviously see that through the trailer. So yeah, I think that what was the question again? Sorry. What was the question?
No, I was talking about the fact that moment where Chris Rock was slapped by Will Smith may actually have opened the door for cancel culture to take center stage.
Well, yeah.
You know.
And shortly after that, Dave Chappelle was attacked on stage.
Yes.
You know, and Dave Chappelle is a pioneer for, you know, speaking truth and, you know, being very fearless about it. And
yes.
And one of the main things that I think about when I deal with fear, and because again, the cancel culture part of it comes in where you're afraid to offend people, you're afraid to of what people think of you, or you're afraid of who's gonna not hire you, or whatever the case is, and that fear is what holds people back from, you know, living out their purpose. So in my experience, my opinion, and frankly what I read in the scriptures, so and fear of man will prove to be a snare, but those who trust in the Lord are kept safe. So that's in Proverbs, I think 29. But it's very important to consider being afraid of others or others' opinions versus speaking truth and being, you know, who God created you to be. And that's really the tension that comes out in this documentary that we didn't even bring out. We just asked questions, and the truth came out. So it's really compelling, and it's much, you know, more profound and compelling than anything that we could have made on our own.
Well, I think we're living in a culture that can't take a joke. We live in a sensitive culture.
Right.
And I don't think you should go to a comedy show if you can't take a joke. If you have an agenda, or you've got this thing that you believe in so strongly that if it's talked about, you don't know if you're going to handle it like an adult, just don't go. Because that's not the place to get upset about what the comic is talking about. He's just telling jokes. We're all here to have a good time. And it's really difficult in 2023 for people seemingly to do that. You can go back to, like I mentioned, Richard Pryor, and I mentioned Eddie Murphy. I can go back as far as Rodney Dangerfield and Don Rickles, particularly Don Rickles, who was a guy that was a great comic in the 60s to early 70s. And he talked about every ethnic group that exists. He even went at African Americans when it was taboo, and it's still taboo to actually do that. And he did it. He didn't care. And one thing about Don Rickles was that you loved it. It was like you understood that the guy was just telling jokes, and people can't seem to get that get their heads around that in 2023.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, I think with Don Rickles, he was you know, known to be a sweet man. I mean, I didn't know him personally, obviously, or anything like that, but he I don't believe it was mean-spirited what he did and what he said. No, and that's the difference, because it's the why or the motivation behind what you're doing, because out of the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks. You know, like, you're not gonna spew hate, you know, if your heart is loving. You're not going to spew love if your heart is hateful. So So that's the difference, I think, between Don Rickles and, somebody who, like Michael Richards. When Michael Richards got, inflamed and came out and was overtly racist in his response to being provoked. So, again, out of the overflow of the heart, it'll be discerned.
The mouth speaketh, and Michael Richards actually, he got off of his comedy chair and he got real, and we saw his heart. Unfortunately for him, it derailed his career. I don't think it's impossible for him to come back, but it derailed his career, and he has not come back as of yet. But if you look at Don Rickles, this guy would open up his show with things like, "Hey, is that your wife?" And the guy go, "Yeah." He goes, "Oh, it's terrible." Oh. And he would always do that, and he did it in Vegas, in the midst of mafioso crowds. He did it once, and he came out of his dressing room, and actually had to knock on his dressing room door, and he thought that he was going to get it this time, because I think it was some mafioso guy's wife that he had done it to, and the guy said, "Are you Don Rickles?" "Yeah, I'm Don Rickles." "Yeah, I came here. I need to talk to you." And he said, "Well, okay, well, what is it?" He said, I "This is it. It's over." And the guy said, "I just want to get your autograph, Donnie. I think you're great."
Yeah, dude. Yes. And
so it's just a different time, Donnie, that we're living in. And I think as clean comedians, we have a huge job to go out there and talk about what God wants us to talk about while keeping the audiences laughing.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. And what's that?
Well, I just think that's something that we have to understand. I think we are kind of in a position where we may be even more likely to get canceled by far than a secular comic.
Right. Yeah, I agree. So when I started doing comedy more, professionally, I was getting, more gigs. I was getting paid more. I had some comics give me advice, some veteran comics, very, and their intentions seemed to be pure, but they would say, don't ever talk about politics. Don't ever talk about religion. Don't ever, do that. And I respectfully disagreed with them. I said, well, I hear you, but at the same time, it's like, if it's in my heart to do it and it's funny and it's something that I feel compelled to do, out of love and out of what I believe God's gifted me to do, I wanted to talk about it, because I always have to, and there's accountability to where, okay, maybe I should check my motives. Why do I want to talk about this? Is it just because I want YouTube hits, or is it because maybe it's helpful, to help other people think for themselves? And because that's where, because God gives us freedom, like in the Garden of Eden, we had freedom to choose what we were going to do, who we were going to listen to. And that freedom is something that comedy allows for. It allows for people to be free thinkers, to discover, okay, what is true about God, and what is true about people, and what is true about me, and how I relate to both God and people. So yeah, I think Christian comics are gonna see a lot of backlash, and it's but that's part of the prophecy, scripture is like, you're gonna be hated, and people are gonna speak ill of you, because of me. And I think that's fine, because I don't find my value in what people say about me or think of me. I find value in what God says about me, and who I know myself to be in Him.
I don't know where Chris Rock is on his spiritual journey. I don't know if he's a Christ follower like you and I, but the way he handled being slapped.
His hands were behind his back. Hands were behind his back.
Yeah.
He had a humble approach, not prideful, not arrogant. Love is not those things, So yeah, there were a lot of things that showed self-control and restraint, and frankly love, and respect. You know,
He exhibited everything that Jesus Christ stood for in that moment.
right.
And not only did he remain humble and composed, he continued on as a professional,
Yes.
as a comedian, hosting the Oscars in front of the world, as if you had tuned in after it happened, you would never have known something had gone wrong.
Right. Yeah.
So you just got to give him a ton of credit, and I think that can be used as a teaching tool for any comedian, and I think clean comedians in particular need to look at that, because we don't always stay in our holy position when we're faced with difficult challenges, which leads me into my next question. And I'll start it with this. The first part of a two-part question. The first part is, do you think Christian hecklers or clean are heckled more than secular comedians, or less?
I think it depends on your material.
Okay.
Know, 'cause, I think it depends on your material. It depends on your audience. For me, my act is very conducive for crowd work and you know, kind of poking fun and teasing people, and all in good fun, not, you know, not malicious in any way. But you know, as I do that, people feel more comfortable. And sometimes when people really connect with you, if they really connect with you, they'll feel comfortable to just speak.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it's not even, you know, nefarious. It's just, oh, well, I'm really vibing with this guy, and you know, I need to, you know, tell him what I'm thinking, because for some reason I believe that's important in the middle of his act. So, you know, I think it just depends on how your act is designed. Now, there are other comics who are maybe not as approachable, or you know, maybe they seem, you know, like somebody you don't want to interrupt because whatever reason. Maybe they're just a monologist and they just have a set, you know, set list, and I'm going to do this joke and these jokes all in a row, and there's no space in between. Those folks are probably not going to get heckled as much. So, and even like that guy, what's the red haired guy's name, who he like intentionally provokes people to get heckled, and he made a career out of it on YouTube. Steven, maybe is his name, I don't know, but the red haired guy, his name escapes me this time, but I think he was on Dry Bar too. But that guy made a career out of, hey, I'm going to say things that are going to psychologically create an environment for people to feel comfortable coming at me or against me, or, you know, saying something. Because again, it's provocative. He's trying to be provocative on purpose. And so, I think it just depends on how provocative you are and in what context.
Well, I think it does. I think most hecklers actually don't mean any harm. I think they either they've been drinking too much, or they just simply want to help out.
They think they're adding. Yeah, they think, oh, this is going to make it better. It's going to make it funnier if I say this, you know?
Yes. And so what happens, a lot of comedians who don't tolerate being interrupted, particularly in the secular world, will fry and bake you.
Yeah.
In fact, to the extent where some will make the rest of their set about you. So you don't want to fool with those dudes. But I think that I had Mark Christopher Lawrence on the show a couple of weeks ago. Mark Christopher Lawrence, a Christian comedian, a clean comedian. He's a good dude. Mark said, at the same time, I'm a man. Okay. And he mentioned an instance where the guy threw a drink at him and missed. And the guy hauled back and threw another one. This time it hit him. And Mark's first inclination was to grab the stool and hit the guy with it. Then he thought, so, well, okay, well, there are a bunch of people he's sitting with at the table, so I don't want to do that.
Right.
And so I think another comedian came up, and security came up, and they escorted the gentleman out.
Yeah, as a good room would, you should do. Yeah.
Yes. That, and because Mark said, you know, I was about this far. He said, I'll kick you in your back. So I did, and that's just kind of a funny story. And matter of fact, he continued on with this set, because I said, how did you get out of that moment? And he just started kind start talking to the guy's girlfriend, giving her the "this is what you don't do at a comedy show" speech, and it kind of went right back into that smooth line upwards, and it was great. And it just all depends. How do you deal with those situations, Donnie, when it happens to you?
Well, I think it's important to remain professional, remain in control of the room. And so the way I like to see it is, I was a criminology major in college, and so I don't know why I did that, but it's I mean, obviously I do comedy. It's not criminology anymore. But the thing is that one thing that always stuck with me was reasonable force. So when you're talking about, if a guy is unarmed, you don't pull out a gun.
Yeah.
And if a guy has a knife, you don't shoot him. You try to disarm him, maybe tase him. So it's all about that reasonable force. And I think with a heckler, if they're only mild, I should only come at them just a little bit, a little bit over what they're bringing at me, so that way I can maintain control of the situation.
Yeah.
If they're coming at me a little bit harder, I come at them a little bit harder, but in a way that's obviously conducive for the organism that we're dealing with as far as the audience, and making sure that, again, everything stays afloat and where it needs, and take it where it needs to go. So in a good room, like I said, where it's well managed, you would immediately have somebody, once it starts to escalate, you would have somebody back you up, like the manager or security will come up and say, "Hey, sir, we're gonna have to ask you to leave if you keep talking. We need you to step outside for a second," whatever it is, to again, keep everything going as it should. So I did have one heckler that my set was 29 minutes, and for 26 of the 29 minutes, this guy was heckling me. And
wow.
Yeah. But the crazy part about it is that it was a new comedy room, and the management didn't know how to handle it, right? So so this guy, so he just keeps interrupting. Again, he thinks at first he's adding to the show, and then I keep trying to, and he was very, very intoxicated. So I mean, he was slurring and all that, and so it was very easy for me to shut down a very drunk person, I mean, but it was at the same time, it got to the, I mean, it was frustrating for me at some point, because like you said, I'm only flesh and blood. I'm a man. I'm not any better than anybody else. But at some point I actually did get angry after 20 minutes of dealing with this guy. I haven't even gotten off 2 jokes yet, you know. And so, but at the same time, because I don't go so hard on him, it wasn't enough for him to shut him down. So, but the audience was loving me ripping into this guy,
Okay, that was helpful.
Yeah, so the show was amazing because the audience was so on board with me dealing with this heckler the way I was, and so like excited about what was going to happen next, because it was unknown. It's like, okay, what's this guy going to do next? And at one point the guy fell asleep, and it was hilarious, right? And so again, not a good example of how to run a show, but definitely, it was one of those where I was just kind of like, wherever the guy went, I just went one up, and then at one point it got so tense that I felt anger inside of me, and I had to express it in a way that would be funny, and also communicate to everyone like, hey, I'm actually getting a little bit frustrated right now, and maybe we should, get this guy out of here. So, and it was only brief. It was a brief moment where I literally was like, "Ooh, I'm actually angry right now," like, because it's hard to, it's hard to make me angry usually. So I have a certain threshold, and we reached it, after 20 minutes. And so, yeah, I mean, again, it's all about reasonable force and having a good management of the room. Christian comics, I mean, and people say, okay, here's something I want to get out of the way, because a lot of, and there are probably other clean comics watching this, and I'm going to say, clean comics say, oh, well, I'm at a disadvantage in a room with dirty comics, and I wholeheartedly disagree with that. I do, because and I'll tell you why. Because I'm not saying it's easy, but if you are serious about the craft of comedy and you're serious about being hilarious and as funny as you can be, you'll get to the point where it doesn't matter who went before you. Like, you'll get to the point where you're so confident and so funny, and have such, precise a precise act, to where I don't worry about who goes before me. I just, I mean, I listen, and I'm like, okay, if they say something, I'm gonna riff off of that, or whatever. But it'll get to the point where, I mean, at the end of the show, I'll have people coming up and be like, "Oh man, you're hilarious," and did you do that one dirty joke? And I'm like, "No, that wasn't me." And they're like, "Oh, okay, well, okay," because like all they know is that it was funny. They don't even realize that I was clean. They just know it was funny.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Yeah. Again, it's hard, but you're not marginalized. You're not a victim. You're not, you kind of just have to rise above the challenge, but it's not a disadvantage in any way. Just be funny. It actually makes you funnier to be in those situations where people are getting easy laughs. You don't want easy laughs. It's not going to make you any better.
No, it's not. And I've had that experience as well, in the midst of, comedians that are being profane. I'm in the middle doing clean comedy, and a gentleman came up to me after the show and said, "I didn't even realize you weren't cursing." And then I realized that you actually were not, and it was just as funny as everybody else, and I appreciate it.
Exactly.
People appreciate that stuff.
Exactly. And you will get that. I mean, all the time. Whenever I'm on a show mixed with, vulgar comics and stuff, I do usually get one or two people who say, "I really appreciate you not being dirty."
And what's amazing is that happens at a show where people paid their money to see dirty comedy. And they'll go, thank you. I appreciate that. There's a way this can be done without being so nasty. And it does bring a certain darkness, even though there are some good comedians out there that use profanity and so forth and so on. There's still a certain darkness from time to time throughout the routine, and that's brought to the room because of what they're discussing. And, people don't always come out of those discussions laughing. It's like, whoa, this is pretty dark. You go into something else. Ladies and gentlemen, we're talking with Donnie, the entertainer Stopa, on Bog Radio in association with 24 Flicks. Also courtesy of KCHF TV in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And you can see this show there on Saturdays at midnight and again at 8 p.m. Donnie, I want to thank you for stopping by. Real quick, we got to step out of here, but I don't want to leave without talking also about your book. You're doing a documentary that you've completed it. It will be released soon, but you've also written a book. Real briefly, tell us about that.
So the book is called Confessions of a Heathen, a complete hypocrite's guide to biblical Christianity. So it is essentially a memoir with anecdotes and but also a lot of valuable lessons. It's autobiographical to a degree, but it also digs into a lot of philosophy, theology, and it's funny. Like I had a lot of fun jokes along the way, and anecdotes that I shared from my life that were absurd and silly. So I'm really I'm so thankful that Jason Earls, like I told you, he convinced me to write a book, and I'm glad he did, because I mean, this thing is I'm very thankful that I believe God gave me all this wisdom through my life experiences and tragedies and all these things, to be able to share something valuable to help other people. I grew up not Christian. So I talk about my background and then going into a Christian environment and just seeing the disparity between, you know, what I read in scripture and what I know of God and Jesus versus how people behave and how people interpret loving God and loving people, which Jesus says the greatest of the commandments. So yeah, I mean, it's something that, I mean, there's a lot of scripture in it. I mean, it's a lot of, like I said, I go pretty deep theologically and sociological, just generally, just introspective and examining my motives and being very transparent about my motives throughout the course of my life and how God redirected that ship in a way that I, am just always in awe of what God's doing. So, yeah, I think it's an awesome book because people who are either very religious all the way to people who don't even like church will appreciate the book, and they have so far, as far as what I've shared and the and I'm getting a lot of pre-orders for it too. So you can go get the book on youdon'tknowmylife.net. That is the landing page for the book, and right now it's on pre-order, so it's on discount. And all the pre-orders, I write a very personalized message in there and sign it for everybody. So yeah, I got that going on right now, and it's in the final editing stages, and it's about to be released.
Donnie the Entertainer Stopa on the Maurice Brown Comedy Show. This is the Comedy in the Kingdom tour, which Donnie is a part of, along with maybe 20 or more awesome, clean comedians. This is going to be an awesome tour that we're going to kick off next summer, the summer of 2024. And I want to thank you, Donnie, for being on the show, talking about your comedy life. And I just can't wait again for this documentary, which talks about comedy versus the cancel culture. And ladies and gentlemen, we will keep you abreast of when that will be released. So to our audience and more specifically to you, Donnie, may the peace of Jesus Christ, sir, continue to be with you and your family. God bless you.
Hey, you as well. Thank you, sir.